This is going to be a comprehensive review of the Westworld scoring competition by Spitfire. And because it's going to be really long, I want to tell you beforehand what I will be covering. First, I'm going to do a summary of what happened as an intro for those who are not familiar with this. Then I'm going to talk a little about opinions and facts. Then a little about disagreements in the comments of my previous video. Then I'll move on to lessons learned for many of us as musicians when we try to score a piece for this competition. The next part is why I'm criticizing Spitfire and not HBO. Then I'm going to do two main blogs, one of them in defense of Spitfire, and then I'm going to talk about things against Spitfire. In particular, there's one thing that overlaps both, which I think it's both good and bad for Spitfire, depending on how we see it, and that is Christian Henson's response. I'm going to talk about that too. I'll follow that with a detailed explanation of how the winning clip breaks the rules of the competition. Then I'm going to address the question whether we should compose with or without context and how much of it. Then I'm going to talk a little about a technical aspect which is called loudness, and some of you may be familiar with this already, but loudness in cinema and TV has a lot of nuances, and this could affect greatly sometimes the experience and the results of something like not just a competition but just composing in general. And I'm going to finish with some closing thoughts at the end. Let's go. Hi, it's Alejandro, and this is Documentary in Progress. I wanted to start by mentioning this about Documentary in Progress. I am an aspiring documentary filmmaker. My plan for the future is to make some documentaries. So when I made this video, this reaction video, it was just something light for me, but it exploded. It got many views and many comments, and that was fine. That was a nice experience. I'm going to talk about that too. But jokes aside, I'm going to do in this video a comprehensive analysis of the situation, and I want to express points of view that are mine and also some that are not mine, but I want to give them a fair platform. That is what documentary filmmakers should do, not just try to sell you this is the objective truth, but here are different points of view and you decide as audience. That's why I told you before all the chapters, let's say, that I'm going to have in this video, just so you know how many things we will be covering and we'll be talking about. So let's jump into it, and let's start with the first section. So firstly, I wanted to talk about opinions and facts. In the comment section of the previous video, somebody was saying, well, this is only your opinion. And my reaction to that is, well, yes, of course it is. But then this person says, you are trying to sell your opinion as a fact. And that's where we disagree. No, I'm not trying to pass my opinion as fact just because I don't say this is my opinion. And in fact, because a lot of it, or even most of it, is an opinion, I'm just not going to be saying this is my opinion every 20 seconds. That will be awkward and slow. I'm just not going to do it. And if you cannot discern an opinion from a fact, well, you have bigger homework to do than just watch YouTube videos. So yes, most of it is my opinion. There are some concrete facts that you guys can check as well, but I'm just not going to be saying this. But yeah, it is my opinion. The other part that I got from the comments that touches on the opinion thing is that, well, I did use this Mario clips, Mario Kart or Mario World clips, you know, and some people take it as humor, as fun. Some people take it as an insult. This is an insult to HBO or to the winner. And well, they were saying because you are now mischaracterizing what they did or something. But the reason I use the Mario Kart clip is because that's the emotion or the feeling that the music evoked in me. So it might not be the same for you, but that's what I was feeling as soon as I started listening to those video game sounds. My reaction was, wow, this is the soundtrack for a video game, not for this. That's why I use that. And the other part of that is, it is a creative license. You know, I'm trying to add some humor to my videos to make them easier to watch, funnier. So it's not going to be just a talking head all the time. That will be painfully boring. So yeah, there it is. There are creative licenses. It doesn't mean that I'm insulting the person, you know, or even the music that he composed. That's what I felt while listening to it. The next thing I wanted to mention is about comments, especially disagreements in the comments that I got in the last video. And it was so nice to get so many comments, not because they agreed with me, but even the comments where people disagreed. A lot of them were just respectful of my opinion, and they expressed the reasons why they disagree, and they gave examples, and they made me think a lot. So, and that's very fine, that's very positive. It's not just, hey, you are wrong and I am right, and that's it. The idea for me with this channel in general is to make people think, to make me think, and to have a conversation. We can have disagreements, and this is a very good example of that, right? Because it's such a heated discussion. People get so passionate about it. So this is a great example of how we can still have civil conversations about a polarizing topic online. There were still some trolls, and I'm pretty sure there will be more, but so be it. People don't really respond to those comments. I haven't seen any heated argument in the comment section, but I'm really glad that we allowed each other the room for a response and a follow-up. Another thing that I learned by reading the comments, and this is very important, is things are not so obvious. And we will talk about this in a few other parts of this video. Things are not so obvious as they seem when people say, this is obviously a black and white genre or something. Well, no, it might not be so obvious. Maybe it is so obvious for you because you watched the show before. Maybe it was obvious for you because you have a keen eye, but things that are really obvious for some are not obvious at all for others. And I've read comments by people saying, this is really obvious, and by some other people saying, this thing, which is the opposite, is also really obvious. Just to give a quick couple of examples of some comments that made me change my mind about some things I said, for example. One of them is, I mentioned the word epic. This scene, this video clip from Westworld is epic, so the music should reflect it. Well, I don't think epic was the right word. It is certainly an action scene, right? There's a car chase, and that's action. But I don't think it's epic anymore. It's kind of obvious to me now, even if it wasn't the first time. It's not epic. There's no hundreds of people doing a battle, you know, in an open field. It's just a few cars. There's guns, there's explosions, but that's probably not enough to be considered as epic. And in that sense, a lot of people are right in saying that they weren't expecting the traditional heavy drums and heavy cellos, you know, spiccato cello for the scoring, for the music, because it's not as epic as some scenes that do have that kind of music. One other thing that some of the comments made me think about is about mainstream, what we call mainstream. And in this case, a mainstream soundtrack would be, you know, heavy brass, heavy percussion, heavy cellos, maybe even heavy synthesizer bass. But I think a lot of the compositions were going in that direction. Mine as well. In the one that I tried, I didn't finish it, but the one that I tried, I wanted to use something like that. Probably because a lot of us interpreted the scene as epic, where it should have been just an action scene. But even within the action genre, there's a lot of that more of the same, right? And yes, mainstream is not always the answer, but there's a reason why mainstream is mainstream. And that reason is very simple. It works. It works most of the time. And if you analyze what kind of music you will see in many TV shows, when you see an action scene or a car chase, most of them will fit that pattern, you know, that heavy brass, heavy percussion, maybe heavy cellos or something. Why? Because it works. It's a tried and tested thing. Why reinvent the wheel? If you know this is going to produce the emotional effect that they are looking for anyway. So yeah, mainstream is the answer most of the time. And none of those directors or producers said to the composer, oh wow, why are you going for heavy brass? You should be going for some video game theme, right? So yeah, that doesn't happen probably in 99% of the cases. So mainstream is not always the right answer, but it's most certainly always the safe answer. One other thing that I wanted to mention is there were many lessons learned, not only for me, but for other people who tried this for the first time. Some of them left comments saying, please go and watch my entry and tell me what you think. And I did, I watched a lot, and I left comments. Some people left comments in mine, my own attempt. And this was great because you can see people at different levels, right? I'm pretty sure in the competition you will find people at the highest level. They are already professional composers, or amateur composers at a really high level, or amateur composers at a low level, or aspiring composers, beginners, and people who just try something for the first time. I just play guitar, so I just grabbed my guitar and did something. So there's a whole spectrum out there. Another lesson for many of the musicians, which again, this is my interpretation from what I saw in many cases when they write the description for their own video, their own entry, is how challenging it is. This is not as simple as just, I don't think it comes natural to all of us, even trained musicians, to just blindly start writing something and something cool comes on the other side of the keyboard or your software. I don't think it's that simple. You have to think a lot about what mood you want to represent, what emotions you want to convey, what feelings you want to produce in the audience. And that is not a simple thing. Maybe there might be one or two Jacob Colliers out there who find that natural, but that's not the reality for all of us. And that's not the reality for most of us. So there's a big opportunity there for musicians with more experience to try and teach others. I would like to see more YouTube channels where musicians are explaining, this is my process, this is how I do it, this is how I come up with the ideas, and not just, this is the library that I use that I'm going to review. Please tell me how you come up with the idea, how do you develop it, how do you iterate over it so that it expresses the emotion that you want to express, and so on. A lot of people pointed out that if we are not satisfied with the result of the competition, we should be angry at the judges at HBO and not at Spitfire because they were just the organizers. And that's where I disagree. Well, I agree that yes, you could be disappointed at the judges because they selected something that you wouldn't have selected. That's fine, that's fair. But my concern with Spitfire is around other things that they handled incorrectly, at least in my view. In particular about the winning piece not complying with the rules, which feels like an insult for the rest of us, for all of us who tried to participate. And I didn't even enter, so I understand the frustration for all of those who did take time to create something complying with the rules, and then the winning piece doesn't. So that's my complaint, and that complaint goes to Spitfire because they are the organizing entity, not HBO. Now we're getting into the most difficult stuff. First, I'm going to say stuff in favor of Spitfire, and you will see why it is in favor. I'm just being devil's advocate if you want. This is not, hey, I'm going to just defend them, but here's what I think we can say to understand their position. So the first thing is, how long does it take to review all the entries they have? This is a piece of music that is 4 minutes long. It was a little longer, 4 minutes and 10 seconds or something. Let's round to 4 minutes. They had 11,000 entries. That is around 730 hours. If you divide that by 8, considering an 8-hour workday, you would need 91 days. So let's round that to 3 months. But basically 90 days of one person doing an 8-hour shift, reviewing videos full time, meaning 40 hours a week or something, for 3 months. That's 90 days. And in the rules, the submissions were closed on June 4th, and the winners would be selected by June 19th or so. This is an approximation, but that's 2 weeks between the end of the submissions and the end of the judging, or at least when the judging could be presented, but let's say 2 weeks. If you want to review 730 hours of footage or audio in that time, you will need 9 people doing full-time review for 2 weeks, meaning that for 10 days. It's approximately 90 days. All of this, not to mention that they are paying this, right? So they are paying one full-time salary for 3 months just to review the entries. And some of you will not agree, but I think a lot of us can agree that this is not practical for any company. It's absolutely impractical to be paying that kind of money and to be spending that amount of time. So what are the options? Well, the options are to discard many of the entries very quickly. So how do you discard an entry quickly? Well, there are a few ways, and none of them are fair. So if you are going to say this is not fair, I am with you. This is not fair, but this is practical. And again, I'm not siding with the company, but I'm saying this is their thinking. As a business, as a company that has to pay for this time, this is probably their thinking. And they're taking a few employees, either from their company or maybe hired temporarily. Hey, can you review this with this criteria? And because there are so many, they might be telling them something like, if in the first few seconds you don't hear something really special, then discard it. Or maybe just jump to the middle of it and see how it is, and then jump to the end. I don't really know, but there's no way that they would have done this by listening to all entries completely. And if they did, that's fine, that's great. But my guess is that they didn't. Some time ago, I was reading an article written by a person who reviews submissions for the Sundance Film Festival, one of the largest in the world. Last year, they received 3,800 feature-length submissions. So let's just ballpark it at 90 minutes per film. We are talking here about 240 consecutive days. This is 24-hour days. This is not 8-hour workday. 240 days of watching submissions, if they're going to watch all of them in their entirety. So this person who was writing the article was talking about how this is impossible in practice. So there's some criteria to just reject entries early. If the audio is really bad, that will be an early rejection. If the story is going nowhere after some time, then that's a rejection. Even if after that there could be a turn in the story and maybe it's really good, but this is a big film festival, so they are looking for things that are strong from beginning to end, and not just one part that is strong. So they do have those things in mind. If something doesn't work in this way or that way, they're going to reject it. They're not going to watch all of it, so they can accelerate their process. Is this fair? No. Ideally, they would watch the whole thing, especially because you have to pay a fair amount just to submit, right? So it's some courtesy that you're expecting, that they will watch your whole entry. But for practical reasons, they do it in Sundance, they do it in other film festivals, and similarly, they do it in this competition. I'm pretty sure. I am not absolutely sure, but this is my guess. And I think it makes sense from a practical point of view. They just cannot watch all of the entries. One more thing that can be said for Spitfire is that in the terms and conditions of the competition, they say that in case of a tie between more than one entry, creativity wins. So they are going to choose the winner based on creativity. So if we assume, and we don't know, we haven't been told what the process is, but if we assume that there was a tie between the winner and some of the other finalists, maybe all of them, I think we can agree that the most creative one was the one with video game music. in which case, yes, that could have been how they selected. This doesn't explain how any of them got to the finalist position in the first place. So some of you don't agree that the winner should have been a finalist at all. So again, those are opinions, but assuming that there was some tie, they could have just said this is the winner because it's the most creative. It's in the rules. And one other thing that was in the terms and conditions, and I've seen this in other terms and conditions from the same company, another competition the year before, is that they can basically do anything without having to explain anything at all. They say in case of a dispute or something, we have the right to decide, we don't have to explain anything to you. And that's in their rules, and by entering the competition, we are agreeing to the rules. We may disagree with the spirit of the rule, but by entering the competition, we are accepting those rules. Those are the rules of the game. So maybe they are just using that. And I'm guessing also that they will not give more public statements because they say in the rules. We don't have to give any explanation to anybody. And of course, one other thing that we have to say for Spitfire is that people are certainly talking about them, at least in the composers community, right? Which is probably the strongest target audience. There are reaction videos, and maybe, well, I don't use other social media channels, but people are talking about this, and for a lot of them is, oh, Spitfire, what is Spitfire? You know, HBO I know, Westworld I probably know, but Spitfire might be new for a lot of people. Well, now they know because they were exposed to this reaction, or somebody sent them a meme, whatever it is. They are now aware of this company, Spitfire, and as a consequence, they are also aware of their products. So their potential customer base probably just grew, maybe even exploded in the last couple of weeks, and that's a good marketing strategy. Again, I'm not defending this, but I'm saying this is probably a positive thing overall for the company. And the last thing that I find positive for the company is Christian Henson's response, but I also find it to be a negative consequence for the company. So I'm going to do that in a different section. I'm going to speak separately about his response, but there's some positive effect there. So what can we say against Spitfire? Well, the first thing for me that bothers me is the clause that I just mentioned about we can do basically anything and we don't have to explain it. I don't even know if that's legal. I am not an expert on legality here, especially around competitions, and even more so because the competition is organized by a British company, so I don't know how the jurisdiction works and all of that. But the fact that they can say what they have in this paragraph, we can do basically anything, we can decide whatever, even it doesn't say, but it implies that it even against their own rules, and they still don't have to explain anything to anybody. That seems to me to be, at the very least, shady, unethical, or showing just lack of integrity, because, well, they are just covering their bases, but in a pretty bad way, in my opinion. And speaking of the terms and conditions, my other pain point with respect to Spitfire is their general public relations handling. And what I mean by this is several things, but the first one is that they removed the terms and conditions from the website. And this is not justified because, well, the competition is over, so why would they keep it up there? First of all, out of respect for all the participants, they should just keep the terms there, the rules, for anybody who wants to check it. But also, they still have the terms and conditions of competition from last year. So if that's the argument, well, they're not being consistent. And removing the terms and conditions from their website just doesn't help their cause. It helps reinforce this shadiness aspect, right? There's something going on there. Why are they not showing this? I also contacted Spitfire's marketing people requesting the terms and conditions, and I got no response. So I feel fully justified in just saying, as a good documentary filmmaker, they didn't respond to a request for comment. The other part that I find just wrong in their handling of the situation is removing comments in the YouTube video of where the finalists were announced, and disabling the counter for likes and dislikes. Why is this? Well, it decreases transparency. Many of the comments that they removed were just the conspiracy theories, right? Like, oh, the winner is friends with the J.J. Abrams or something. And if that is not true, well, you just raise a statement and making it official. No, there's no connection between these two guys. The fact that he has worked in some movie doesn't prove anything. Just make something official, but by removing comments in that way, you are just trying to put out the fire with gasoline and just making it worse. So that's what I think of Spitfire's handling of this. Another thing related to the PR handling is Christian Henson's response. I just mentioned that I find his response to be for Spitfire and against Spitfire, depending on how we see it. So I'm going to talk about that separately in a moment. And the last thing that I think Spitfire got wrong is that there are a few things missing in the rules that it would be nice for them to include next time if they ever repeat this. And not just Spitfire, any company that makes a scoring competition like this one, they should take into account these missing things that we are going to mention. So the first one is, how much context should composers have or consider in their compositions? And when I say context is, if a composer hasn't watched the show at all and they just watch this clip, is that okay? Because they haven't watched even the rest of the episode. So they might not know the musical language that they are trying to match. And in that case, they should, what the company should say in the rules is, in the judging, the judges are going to follow or are going to consider whether the entries match the overall musical feeling or language of the rest of the show. And I think that would be very unfair, but it is possible. And it's going to be unfair anyway, because if the judges, like in this case, if the judges are the creators of the show, it is just impossible for them to be absolutely objective and judge as if the rest of the show had never happened. They have been working on this for years, so they have already watched so many times, so many episodes, that they know the little cues and the sound effects and the music, how it integrates with the dialogue. They know all of that. They've heard it again and again. So when a composer uses something like that, even in a very subtle way, just to add some flavor, well, the judges might notice that even without realizing, because they have been working on that for so long. So even if it's stated in the rules, it's still something very difficult to do. But I think it should be explicit. It wasn't explicit in these rules whether we should follow the melodies and rhythms and themes of the rest of the show or not. The other rule that wasn't mentioned is around loudness. And loudness might be something that is not familiar for all of the composers that participated, but if that's the case, well, if it's put in the rules, they will just go there to YouTube, to Google, and try to find what loudness is about. What is it? How can I measure it? How can I comply with some range of loudness? And the reason is very simple. When you listen to the different entries, especially just even between the finalists, some of them are really loud and some of them are way closer to the original clip from HBO, which has a kind of standard loudness for television. And 2 of the finalists had that, but 4 of them didn't, including the winner. They were really loud to a point that it can be uncomfortably loud. So they didn't comply with loudness standards, but again, this wasn't requested in the rules. So what I'm saying is, hopefully you organizers can add this for future competitions.
Disable safety features.